While there's no NASCAR on for the next 2 weekends, I thought we should definitely talk about this. Leave your comments down below during the video or after you watch this to leave your opinions down below. It's going to be one heck of a conversation, I think this video is going to be. Is the next-gen car cooked? Like, is it done? Is there no hope for it? That is the question we're going to ask today because I feel like it is a conversation that we have been having to have for a pretty long time now. It's been about 3 years now of the next gen car, and it is not living up to what it should be, but it's also not as bad as some people make it out to be, but it's definitely a problem. A long time ago now, probably 5 years ago, it's been a pretty long time, but I made a video on this channel, I think it was probably 6 years ago, 2018 maybe. I made a video on this channel talking about like how to fix NASCAR's aero issues, and it was a video about the X3 test car, the famous or the infamous X3 test car that NASCAR was using to test out a new car. Essentially, they were in the process of what we have now, which is a next gen car. They were testing some stuff out, and Liam helped me in that video to help understand what NASCAR was trying to do in that video. And I'm going to show some pictures here of that car, because you could see that the car definitely looks a lot like a next-gen car, but it also looks a lot like the COT box car. And this car still, even after all this time, does answer a lot of questions that we have, or even that I have, about the next-gen car. And you guys have heard me in multiple race review videos talk about the next-gen car, and I will actively say, I'm not sure why the car does this, or why it does that, why it's so bad at this racetrack, but why is it so good at this? Like, it could be absolutely terrible at a specific mile-and-a-half racetrack, but at another mile-and-a-half racetrack, the car can be absolutely fantastic. It's a very weird car to kind of understand and to kind of grasp, but that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about everything about the next-gen car, the issues that it has, the possible solutions that it has, and whether if it's overall cooked. Now, I am not a car guy, a setup guy, bump, rolls, springs, camber, caster, sway bars. That is not my thing. I have always watched NASCAR from a driver's perspective. I've had to learn a lot about the race cars, but I always watch NASCAR from a driver's perspective. How I entertain the sport is from a driver's perspective. I want to see drivers race each other. I just want the car to be able to do that, is to let the drivers do what they want to do. So I think it's very important that we play these clips. These are clips from Denny Hamlin on the Dirty Mo Media podcast and from Joey Logano. So we're going to play those right now.
And we all know these next-gen cars are terrible in traffic. They're the worst cars in NASCAR in traffic. So when we designed them, we designed a car that is worse than it's ever been in traffic. I asked him 3 times. 3 times I asked John Probst before this car came out, are you sure it's right? Because you haven't put it around any other cars during these preseason testing. And then finally in December, before they launched the car, they put it on track with another car and they see that it's, oh, we got a problem. Well, no kidding. You had 2 years to figure this out. God, it's frustrating as hell. This is what it is. It's it's never put on a great race, but you then watch the Xfinity race, and it's like you watch them. They're able to pass. If a good car is able to pass, then they are able to manipulate the car in front of them instead of getting manipulated by the car in front of them. That is the big difference between Xfinity and Cup, is that Cup, the closer you get to them, your car takes off. You lose all downforce, it's done. The closer you get to the car in front of you in Xfinity, and what we saw Riley Herbst and many others do, is that as soon as you get to the close to the rear of the car, they start losing rear downforce, and then they get off the bottom and you shuck them. And that's what we used to do with the Gen 4 car and 5 car, is that we could always get the guy in front of us loose. Now you can't do that because they're not making any overbody aerodynamics, and it's all underbody. So you're not able to take air off their spoiler because there's not hardly any air going on the spoiler in the first place. So it's we got a physics problem.
It's not the transaxle. It's not the independent rear suspension. It's not just the bigger tire. It's not just that we have less horsepower. It's not just that we have a diffuser. It's everything, right? It's all of it is different now. And as a sport, you kind of got to eliminate, process of elimination of what's doing what. Do I think a 5-speed transaxle is doing it? No, that's not going to make a difference in racing. Do I think the independent rear suspension really changed it? No, not much. Do I think the rear diffuser changed it? 100%. The way we race, the way we set up the cars, the way the nose is, I think that is one of the main reasons why we cannot loosen up the cars anymore in front of us. We used to have a splitter that we would drag on the ground, right, as low as we can get it, and the back up, right, as high as we can get it with skirt length. That's what we tried to do. And when you packed air on the car in front of you, it would loosen them up. Well, now we have the splitters up more than we've ever have, right, in the old days, because you're trying to feed air to the diffuser, because the diffuser is yesterday's splitter, right? Getting the diffuser height as low as you can used to be the same as getting the splitter as low as you can. That's where all the downforce is made. And so it's just that to me is the number one biggest difference with the next gen car compared to the Gen 6 car. So in every previous car before that, and every truck, Xfinity, all of those things have the splitter down, and they don't have rear diffusers on the car. And the way they approach the race car is completely different. And I think that is why we cannot loosen up the car in front of us.
So whatever I say in this video, guys, what you've just seen for the past 3 minutes from Denny Hamlin and from Joey Logano, hopefully it's not copyrighted. I apologize, NASCAR, if it is. Hopefully not. Hopefully you let me use that footage. I pray. I cannot explain anything more or anything better, honestly, than those two. Those two, they drive the car every single week. Especially Joey Logano is very underrated when it comes to the understanding the car, what it does, and just being able to you need to have an understanding of it to drive it to the best of your abilities. And so, especially what Logano said definitely sticks out as to where it's a combination of everything, but also what Denny Hamlin said in terms of what NASCAR might have been doing when they were testing the next-gen car. So some information that we didn't know is that we did not know that NASCAR did not test the car in traffic until a few months before the Daytona 500. That seems like a very big omission. If that is true, it doesn't surprise me, but it does worry me, and it leads to a lot of the issues that we have. But I'm going to focus a little bit more on Logano's comments than Hamlin's. We'll touch on Hamlin's more a little bit later, but focus on Logano's comments because he does mention all the changes to the next-gen car, and that's the most important thing to understand with this car is that there are a lot of changes. There's a 5-gear sequential shifter in the race car. There is a completely new rear suspension in the race car. The tires are wider. There's more tire to the track, which means you basically have more grip since you have more tire. The actual car itself is a lot more spec. The teams are in such a tight box, even tighter than they've ever been before. And so there's not a lot of things you can do to really separate your car from the rest of the field. So the field is going to be a lot tighter when you're racing on track. Not fully spec, but it's very close to being spec. You have new cooling systems in the engine, so the car doesn't really run as hot anymore. And you have the underbody of the race car, which is the foundation of it. It is the rear diffuser and the entire underbody where the car is completely different from anything NASCAR has ever done before, and it resembles a lot of IMSA sports cars, which is not surprising since, Jim France owns IMSA. Now let's take a look at the X3 car again. What do you notice about the X3 car? The X3 car does not have the rear diffuser. One thing that I've heard from drivers and teams talk about is that it cleans up the air from underneath the race car, and so when the air shoots out from underneath the race car, it will not be as dirty as it was with other race cars. And we're going to specifically talk about not the Gen 6 car, but actually the Gen 5 car. So Gen 6 was 2013. I want to talk a lot about the Gen 5 car, which was 2007 to 2012. Now, if you're too young to remember that car, which makes me feel really old just saying that, but in 2007 to 2009, we had one version of the race car, and then 2010 to 2012, we had another version of the race car before the Gen 6 car came out. And if you think that the discourse or the controversies or the debates around the next-gen car is anything, you better be very, very thankful we don't live in a world like we did in 2007, like we do in 2024. Because if 2007 had social media like 2024 has, I promise you NASCAR was never going to live a day with that COT car. The criticism of that car was unbelievable because of how ugly it looked and how much slower it was and the boxiness of it, and it just it just looked awful, and people did not like it. And trust me, if you were alive during those days, if you were comprehending what was going on, I was 10 years old to 12 years old, I fully understood. The criticism was very loud. But that race car still, that Gen 5 car actually did run pretty well. It did have the main thing that we all want from NASCAR is drivers being able to race each other. You can say whatever else you want about the COT. It had that. And, of course, the main function of that car was safety. With, obviously, Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001, 2007, you had still a Gen 4. But the main reason for that car, the car of tomorrow, was safety. So from that day on, guys, safety was always going to be paramount. I want to make it very clear that no matter what NASCAR does, I don't think any solution to any issues that NASCAR has with their car should ever involve taking away safety features. It should never involve that. If you have to sacrifice safety for a better race car, I do not agree with that. And we saw in the first year of the next gen car that the car was actually not that safe. It was not taking the impact of the race of the crashes for the drivers very well. It is probably what sent Kurt Busch into early retirement with his qualifying crash at Pocono. So that is never a road that I want NASCAR to go down, where you can make a better race car, but you have to sacrifice safety features for it. No. Now, this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the complicated territory. I want to show you this picture and some of this excerpt from Racing Refresh, where they talk about the NASCAR Next Gen aerodynamics. Now, this is from Racing Refresh, and to understand the Next Gen car, this is very, very important, and it actually leads to a lot of what we said about the X3 car. All those years ago, when we were talking about the X3 car, the whole point of the X3 car was to clean up the air so that the following car would not have as much of a disadvantage when racing. That was the whole point. That was the whole concept, and that is what NASCAR was trying to do. And technically, this race car does that. It technically does direct the air to a different area, so the trailing car does not, in concept, does not have as much dirty air to go through, so you're able to get closer racing. And now, if you watch next gen races compared to Gen 6 races, that technically is true until you get to about half a second. When you get to about half a second behind, about 5 car lengths behind another driver, it gets really, really bad for purposes that NASCAR accidentally created. They didn't mean it. They meant to clean up the dirty air, but they actually cause more problems. And this article by Racing Refresh goes into the kind of details of it. And so let's talk about right here. So the downforce. The downforce is being generated not from the top of the race car like we usually have in normal stock car racing, the Gen 4 car, the Gen 5 car. It was generated on the upper part of the car. That's why you had the twister cars of 2007. The rear wing of the COT was to try to generate downforce. Spoiler height, generating downforce. NASCAR said, okay, let's get rid of all that and try to not focus on that. Let's try to generate downforce from underneath the car, so that way we don't got to worry about it. And so that's kind of what they did. So this explanation, the air hits the front splitter of the car. The majority of the air goes around and above the car following the body of the vehicle. The air that impacts the splitter slows the car down to an aerodynamic load. It creates a pocket of dead air with a velocity of 0. But with the stepped splitter, which is the same thing that the X3 car had, the splitter where the middle of the splitter, it's up, so you have air going underneath the car. It is squeezed between the car and the ground. Because the air does not want to change volume, physics forces that air to move faster to a velocity of 2. With slower air moving over the top of the car and faster air moving below the car, the aerodynamic load from the air makes the cars have increased grip and traction, which creates downforce. Complicated scientific explanation, but downforce. And this is where the problem is. The problem comes here. So this is basically this entire part here talks directly about the X3 car, exactly what the X3 car was trying to create with the stepped splitter to create downforce, so that even cars behind another car could still get air to the nose of the car. If you look at Xfinity Series racing and you're trying to pass somebody, you are trying to get air to the nose of your car. It helps you turn. So that was the idea of the stepped splitter, because when we had the COT, the Gen 4 from 2000, ever since ground effect came in 2003, so the cars were, the valence was planted to the ground. There was never air getting underneath the car. So if there was another car in front of you, you never had air really hitting your car, and obviously dirty air got worse and worse and worse from that point on. But the rear diffuser. So this goes into like the scientific explanation that I am not good at, but we are using Racing Refreshers terms to help us. So the problem, the underside of the next gen car is completely sealed off due to a carbon fiber under panel, which allows air that moves under the car to gain velocity and cause more turbulence and wake. If you are in a car behind our lead car, your initial contact with air is at volume 2, velocity 2. Air over the top of the car is slowed down to velocity 1. Air under the car is at velocity 2. Your downforce is less effective as the car in front. Adding the diffuser to the rear slows the V2 air to V1 air, allowing the downforce of the following car to be more effective. It also allows the air to be redirected in a vertical trajectory to allow trailing cars to not be affected as much due to the downforce. So that's the idea of the rear diffuser, is that it slows down the velocity of the air that's going through the car, and it shoots it up. So when you shoot it up, obviously you're trying to get it away from the trailing car as much as possible. That's why when you watch next gen racing, you do see that the cars if they are a second behind, 8/10 behind, they follow better. They follow better than the Gen 6 car. The Gen 6 car really had that massive issue, but this car does follow better. The problem is when you get right to like 5/10, everything goes wrong. And this article is positive about it. Look, they're not saying the diffuser is a bad thing. The idea of the diffuser was to help with clean air racing. Again, not a new concept. IMSA, IndyCar, Formula One, they've all used it. It's never been used in NASCAR. Even the person writing this article, when NASCAR does well, every other motorsport benefits from it. I, for one, cannot be happier. The average margin of victory is the closest it has ever been. Green flag passing is an all-time high. This is the 2022 season after 14 races, which was the debut season of the next-gen car. And this is Colin Best, by the way. But then we have to go back to what Denny Hamlin said.
And that's what we used to do with the Gen 4 car and 5 car, is that we could always get the guy in front of us loose. Now you can't do that because they're not making any overbody aerodynamics, and it's all underbody. So you're not able to take air off their spoiler because there's not hardly any air going on the spoiler in the first place.
And then it all makes sense when you hear Joey Logano talking about the rear diffuser.
I think that is one of the main reasons why we cannot loosen up the cars anymore in front of us. We used to have a splitter that we would drag on the ground, right, as low as we can get it, and to back up, right, as high as we can get it with skirt length. That's what we tried to do. And when you packed air on the car in front of you, it would loosen them up. Well, now we have the splitters up more than we've ever have, right, in the old days, because you're trying to feed air to the diffuser, because the diffuser is yesterday's splitter, right? Getting the diffuser height as low as you can used to be the same as getting the splitter as low as you can. That's where all the downforce is made.
It created an accidental effect, basically. And this is something that NASCAR, I want to criticize them, but you have to understand it's very hard to create a race car where the people involved in your sport are going to make it try to go as fast as possible. And Formula One has the same issue. Formula One can make as many regulations as possible, and they can try their best to create regulations that create better racing for Formula One, but the race teams, their job is to make the car go as fast as possible. Not for it to be entertaining for the fans. They need to go as fast as possible to win. If you give the teams the option, that's what they're going to do, and it just seems like NASCAR underestimated what the teams are going to do with this race car. It's not a surprise that really, honestly, the best racing we've seen with the next-gen car was early 2022. And then when the teams get their hands on it more and more and understand it more and more, now you see the dirty air becoming week in, week out more and more of a problem. So now after all this time, I've been looking up articles, watching videos all weekend. I have a much better understanding of the issues with the next-gen car and what you could probably do to try and fix it. But then comes another problem. That involves NASCAR and money. Yes, of course. NASCAR's already in negotiations with the teams about the new bargaining rights with the new TV deal, and it has been very clear that NASCAR does not want to spend a lot of money. This next-gen car, in its all its glory, it was also designed to save money. This was a cost-cutting expenditure. They were trying to get another OEM. You already have Toyota, you already have Chevy, you already have Ford. They were trying to get another OEM like Honda to come in, so that way the sport would be healthier. The OEMs provide a lot of the finances to the teams and everything. So a lot of what NASCAR has been trying to do is to save money, to cut costs. So how would you fix this issue? Unfortunately, you would have to spend a lot of money. You'd have to test it, and you'd have to basically redesign the race car, because the main fundamental way of generating downforce in this car that you designed it is all in the underbody. It's functional. It's essential to the design of the race car. So you can't remove it. You can't remove the undercover panel. You possibly could remove the rear diffuser, but there's a lot of other aspects of the race car that were designed in order or with the rear diffuser in mind. So there will have to be probably a couple of years of testing and a lot of money from NASCAR's side to want to fix this. And from everything I've seen from NASCAR in probably the last 18 months, they don't want to spend money. That is very, very clear. Look at all the changes that NASCAR have made in general. Do we practice? Are there actual practice sessions anymore, guys? No, there's not. Refusing to give the teams a bigger share of the pot for the bargaining for the TV rights deal, and the teams are still operating at a loss. So again, do they want to spend more money? Do they want to lose a little bit of the money they make? No. And that's the worrying part. That's the worrying part, is that in order to fix this, you do got to make changes. And we have seen it before, guys. It took 3 years for NASCAR to make fairly a simple change. They took the rear wing off of the COT and they put the spoiler back on. Now, I'm not saying they should do anything like that or something like that's, again, on top of the car. It's not underneath the car. It's honestly a pretty simple change, and it's not that complicated, or it doesn't cost that much money. But NASCAR is going to need to show a willingness to accept that they made a mistake with the car, and they're going to have to show a willingness to admit that they want to make a change to the car. And to be honest, I don't think they're going to do that. Not anytime soon, because it will cost them tens of millions of dollars in order to want to do this. So what's the fix? And to be honest, I can't tell you exactly a fix, but it is very... it looks very common that the rear diffuser is probably one thing that has to go. That rear diffuser has really put NASCAR in a box here in terms of we have more road courses than ever. We have more short tracks than ever, which is exactly what NASCAR fans wanted. And now NASCAR created a car when all those changes came into place, that we have more road courses than ever, we have more short tracks than ever, but we have a race car that performs the worst it ever has at short tracks and road courses. Any racetrack that is a single lane kind of racetrack, which most road courses obviously are, and a lot of short tracks are, this car will not perform in its current configuration. Martinsville, Bristol, old style Bristol, any road course, it's not going to perform well. It will not give the racing that you want to see. The racing that you saw with the COT car and even the Gen 6 car, you will not see with the next gen car, because the teams are closer than they have ever been before. But that rear diffuser in the back has basically made it impossible for teams to get behind each other and to race. You can't loosen anyone up, as Joey Logano was explaining. The rear of the car is on the ground, and as a driver from behind, there's nothing you can do to take air off the spoiler, because this race car is not designed that way. It's not designed like previous stock cars were, where the air was on the top of the car. There is no way a driver from behind can do anything to affect the air going from underneath the race car. So we have a fundamental problem. It's a fundamental problem that NASCAR is going to have to invest a lot of time and money in to actually fix. And until then, I think you kind of just got to enjoy the races that you get. The racetracks that you go to, that like a Kansas, even a Darlington, a Charlotte, where there are multiple lanes that you can actually run, you will still get solid NASCAR racing because there are multiple lanes. But if you go to Martinsville, which is one of my favorite racetracks ever, Martinsville is not going to be that great. It just won't be, because you just simply can't do what you used to do in NASCAR. You can't do bump and runs because the cars are basically they're tanks. And again, you can't take the air off the spoiler. So that the whole premise of short track racing with this race car is kind of gone. And that kind of sucks. And to be honest, I really want something back. So could we get a short track package? Is that something maybe NASCAR could do? Like you don't want to, I don't know. Like can we get something like that? Is that possible? Is there anything we can do to make this car perform better at short tracks and road courses without fundamentally changing it? And that's the question that I don't have an answer for, and I don't know if NASCAR has an answer for. I don't know if you have an answer for. And it's probably not horsepower, by the way, guys. Everyone always talks about horsepower, and I found this article from March 12th, 2024. It's basically on a blog. I saw it on Twitter in the replies, and it talks about if people want to add like 1,000 horsepower to a car, it's not going to make a difference. And I agree with that. It won't make a difference, guys. It won't. If you add 400 horsepower to this current race car, if you put it to 450 horsepower, so it has no horsepower, like what you saw in the Xfinity Series race with a car and a package that had literally basically no horsepower, they were topping out at 170, but you still saw the fundamental NASCAR racing, being able to get underneath someone, try to make a pass. That's because of it's all aerodynamics. It has nothing to do with the horsepower. Do I want horsepower back? Of course, but I don't really want the horsepower back if it's not going to change the issues that we currently have, which are all aerodynamic wise. It's really not horsepower based. So I just want to touch on some parts of this article that I really do agree with. So in a series like NASCAR, where the teams are very much bound inside a tightly controlled box by the rule book, any advantage that anyone can find comes at a premium. However, it all appears to be chasing down the very edges of performance, such as manipulating 1% item of aero, which is why Logano tried driving with a webbed glove to block out window drag, or why JGR put down 30 layers of tape underneath the livery wrap. The thing that nobody can address is that a NASCAR Cup car is very wide for length. They're very hefty chunks that just don't rotate enough and through any of the 3 axis of rotation, and so that they are stable, but they don't pitch much and they don't turn enough in the corners all that well. It's a stock car, it doesn't really turn. He then goes to talk about a lot of, aerodynamic and car stuff. If you got, I'll link the article in the description if you want to read it all basically, but he basically talks about the width and the length of the race car. This is something that Formula 1 and Formula 1 fans have a big issue with because the cars are too big. And NASCAR cars have always been too big, but they are stock cars, so I kind of understand that. But again, with this car with the bigger tires, it does play a little bit of a problem, and that's what he says here. Because you can't really narrow the race car. That's not going to work. Like actually narrowing the race car is not going to work. So what about narrowing the tire? So instead of that bigger tire that we have now, that wasn't really a change that was probably necessary. I don't remember ever asking for a bigger tire. I don't remember any race fan ever asking for a bigger tire. I don't remember that ever happening. And so, I feel like if you want to get better racing at short tracks, this won't fix everything, but it's a part of it. Like Logano said, it's a part of it. And I don't think there's really a need to go to a bigger tire. I didn't see that before. I don't see that now. And with more proof, I think NASCAR should just go ahead and make that change. Now, at the end of the day, this is technically the race car that he wanted to technically design. Like in this would be the greatest or the best aero car. Obviously, it looks crazy because that looks like a 1970s Thunderbird. But his point is that if you want the perfect aerodynamics for a race car, it's probably not going to look good, and it's probably not going to be safe because it's going to have to be a pretty small, narrow race car with that thing on the back of it because the air needs to go to it. So there's not really a perfect answer to any of this. Do you want your race car to look cool, or do you want it to race cool? What do you want? And with ground effects coming in 2003 in a NASCAR, and it completely changed, ever since then, and the cars were on the ground, and all the teams want the cars to be on the ground, it's very hard, guys, to really come up with a solution that everybody agrees on that doesn't cost too much. It's basically like an impossible equation that you're always going to try and constantly solve. And I want to end the video by just saying this, is that we're never going to have the perfect race car. There will always be discourse, and there will always be issues, and someone will always have something to say. Like, it will always be that way. But I feel like NASCAR and the drivers and the teams could definitely work together a little bit better to try to create a better product for the fans, because a better product for the fans means a better product for NASCAR, which means a better life for the race teams and a better life for the drivers. So if everyone could work together, that would be very nice. So NASCAR, before you bring out a new car, you should probably test it with other race cars, not a few months for the 500. If that is true, that is just very sad, and I don't know what the hell you guys were doing. So the answer to the question, is the next-gen car cooked? This version of the next-gen car? Yeah. Yeah, if there's a rear diffuser on it and you still have the bigger tires and everything, yes. You will have good races, and you will have races that are entertaining because the field is close and because drivers are just doing kamikaze stuff because they know they have to take advantage on restarts. But if you want one-on-one battles where a driver can drive up to someone else and get them loose and make a pass like old school NASCAR or a bump and run at a short track, no, that's not going to happen. This car does not allow that to happen. Road courses will not be very great. You will not have people coming up through the field at road courses. And this is all something, I'm not telling you guys anything new. We've all seen this. So this iteration of the next-gen car, is it cooked? Yeah, it is. Do I still like it? Yeah, I like the idea of the next-gen car. It's just this iteration of it, this version of it, is not perfect. I was excited back when the next-gen car was announced. I was excited when I saw the X3 details. That X3 car, in a weird way, is kind of my ideal race car because it doesn't have the diffuser in the bottom. It doesn't have the bigger tires. It looks like a really cool race car. I still wish that car actually it doesn't look overcomplicated. One thing about the next-gen car is that it does seem a little bit overcomplicated. The rear diffuser, the 5-gear sequential shifter, was that really necessary? The independent rear suspension, was it really necessary? The bigger tires, was it really necessary? I feel like NASCAR just overcomplicated themselves. So I am still a fan of the newer car, the next-gen car. But I'm more of a fan of the idea of it that hasn't come to light yet. I have a feeling you can get a next-gen car that performs at all types of racetracks, performs at the 1.5 miles, performs at the short tracks, performs at the road courses, makes everybody happy. Of course, not everyone will be happy, but that car does exist. And I feel like that NASCAR, if they want to get it, they're going to have to change this version. This version is not going to get there. And really the first thing they got to do is admit it. I feel like NASCAR don't want to admit it. They really, really, really are stubborn when it comes to admitting when they make a mistake and admitting when they want to change something. They really, really don't like to do that. I can't remember a time where NASCAR actually did admit to something like that. They don't. They will make changes, but they will never admit to their mistakes. No. They just kind of stick to it and they keep going. The single race playoff format thing crap is definitely a example of that. So I apologize for this video being long and I've been yapping for over 30 minutes or something. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree with my opinions? There's a lot of facts and a lot of opinions out there. And yeah, so that's really the whole next-gen car debate. I don't really want to talk about the next-gen car anymore. I'm done with that. Maybe next Sunday we'll talk about the championship format. I'll be a lot more passionate about that because that one doesn't need, science and aero physics and everything to fix. That's just common sense. So yeah, that should be next Sunday. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.